All right, so here we have a list of widgets that it's rendering dynamically with some information, an array of widgets that we're getting from the controller. We're rendering headings and images correctly, but something doesn't seem to be quite right with rendering the raw HTML. We see that indeed we are providing a text attribute with the raw HTML, this kind of this lame paragraph, but what Angular has done is it has realized that the content that you're asking to render, right, it's HTML. Okay, and the default behavior is to escape the HTML. Right, that's the default behavior. Now, if you want to unescape it, right, you want to say no, this is actual raw HTML. Right, I want you to compile this into a DOM object and then add it dynamically into the containing DOM elements. You have to explicitly use another ng attribute here called ng bind HTML. We're asking it, hey, this is not just plain HTML. This is raw HTML. I'm sorry, that's not plain text. This is raw HTML. I want you to interpret it as HTML and then render it and format it, like with paragraphs and divs and images and links and everything. Okay, and then give it where to find the HTML. The HTML is in this attribute here, widget text. Yes? All right. So if we go back and re-render, notice that it's even worse. It's not even there. What happened? Okay, and we see that we have an additional error, an even worse error than before. It says SCE unsafe. SCE unsafe. So what Angular is doing here is that it says, okay, you have asked me to unescape this HTML, interpret it as HTML, compile it as HTML, and then add it to the DOM. That's what you want me to do. Okay, but the default behavior for Angular is to treat any of this dynamic HTML. Not obviously all this is dynamic, right? All this is dynamic, but it's dynamically being done in a view, right? Presumably, this is a human being who wrote this, okay? And if I'm deciding that this is the content and whatnot, I actually type this in, right? Now the way it interprets HTML is a little bit different because HTML, one of the things that could happen is that if this is interpreted as HTML, presumably this is coming from some database or from data store, right? Somebody copied this HTML perhaps, right, or with some editor, right, and stored it in the database. And now we're asking you to take that, right, and then reinterpret it as HTML. And one of the problems might be that somebody might have copied malicious HTML, right, and stored it in the database, right? Why malicious? Well, that HTML might include links, right? CSS links. It might include maybe an older version of Bootstrap, right? Or incompatible version of jQuery, or an incompatible link to an older Angular or a very newer Angular, right? Which is going to, once it gets compiled and added into our DOM, it's going to collide with our JavaScript, our CSS, yes? And it could break our application, yes? Right? So the default is not to trust, right, dynamic content such as that, right, that somebody might have just copied off somewhere and just pasted it. Actually, that's how we did it, right? We went to Gizmodo and we started copying HTML from there, right? So what Angular is asking us to do here is to explicitly vote confidence on this content, right? It says you need to tell me explicitly that you trust this. That you have done your homework of scrubbing any malicious content, now you've done this, and then letting me know that you trust this, okay? So that's the default behavior, right? So to do this, we're going to implement that trust vote, right? We're going to do that at the controller. We're going to say, go back to the controller and trust this content. Okay, we're going to pass the content, right? In the controller, we're going to do some magic, right? And we're going to vote. We're going to tell explicitly Angular, hey, yes, I trust this. I've done my homework. I've scrubbed it. It's not dangerous. Go ahead. Go on and render it. All right? All right, so let's do that. Let's go to the controller and actually implement that. All right? So I'm going to go back to the controller, right? And I'm going to implement that function, maybe down here. Okay? And implement it in a function of the same name. And here's the HTML that we want to trust. Okay, right? So to trust this, right? We need to use a service called the SCE service, which is the strict contextual escaping, meaning you want me to unescape this content, right? And there are many types of content that I could unescape, right? In this particular case, there's HTML. But there are other pieces of content that might be dangerous, right? Downloading video or downloading audio or an iframe or an object or plugin, right? All those things could be rendered also dynamically, yes? But all those things could ruin our content, right? If we're loading an iframe, that iframe is an entire website that we have no control over, right? And that iframe could have its own malicious content that we might not want to trust, yes? So there's different contexts that we want to be able to vote yes or no, we trust these things. So to do this, we have a dedicated service to do this, right? So we're gonna load that into our controller, right? And we're gonna use it to trust this content. We're gonna trust this content, and there's several trust functions that can trust different types of resources. Okay. In this case, we're gonna trust. I think it's trustAsHtml. No. Am I spelling this right? Trust as. Oh, right. I'm not in the right place. Let's go here. Let's try it again. TrustAsHtml. There it is. TrustAsHtml. TrustAsHtml. You pass it the HTML, right? And you are voting that yes, I have done my homework. Now this HTML is okay. All right. So here's trustAsHtml, and we pass it that HTML. Right. Presumably, before we do that, we do our diligence to scrub any unsafe content, and there's some libraries to do that. Right, there's some libraries that you can pass it through content. It will automatically remove any scripts, any CSS, any bad words. It will scrub all that, remove any of that content, and then give you back a clean, right, pristine content that you can then trust here. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to assume, we're just going to blindly trust this content, okay, and we're going to return. We're going to return this HTML. What's going to be returned here is a signed content saying that, yes, I have officially signed this off as this content. And ngbind HTML, is expecting a safe content, right, before it actually renders it, right? All right, so let's go back and try this again. Let's re-render, and now we have, I believe this is the paragraph. Yeah, there it is, our lorem ipsum paragraph. But let's make the content just a little bit more interesting. I think we had a paragraph somewhere here that we had copied from Gizmodo. Maybe it was this one. So I'm just going to copy this here. This long paragraph, copy, and I'm going to put it in the paragraph here. Instead of our lame lorem ipsum, I'm going to paste it in there. And let's re-render that. And there it is. There's our content from Gizmodo. Yes? No, it just puts it in an object. It is expected object that has a particular API that then you can ask it for its content, right? But that's not that you don't do that. ngbind knows how to do that. Yes, right. You explicitly do it by using trustAsHtml.
But like, could someone else on their own website trust their HTML wrapped in an object and then pass that to
I guess in the console. In the console, let's see. You could put a breakpoint. You could put a breakpoint. Is it there here? In the widget. In the widget list, right? If you put a breakpoint right here, assuming that somebody can read your code, right? Typically, we would not put code like this on the field, right? This would be all jumbled up, that it would be unreadable to human eyes. You could put a breakpoint there, and do you have access to SCE from the console? You do, right? So you could take some content. Obviously, this is HTML that is being passed from the template, right? So you're not including that. You would have to perhaps, let's see. No, well, no, you can't return from here, right? You can't return from here and feed it back into the templates, right? Yeah, yeah. Yep. All right. Okay, so we've done that. Let's now focus on the URL for the YouTube. Okay.